So now that you've blocked in your basic layout and you've got your color scheme dialed in, it's time to talk about typography. The first thing I'd point out that in a good infographic, you actually don't want to have a lot of text. The idea is to show, not tell. So if there's ever a time you can make it an icon or an illustration or use a photo, focus on the graphic part of the infographic so that people can really see it rather than have some textual explanation. Graphs are great, anything else but type when you can. So having said that, there are some essential elements that you'll have to use to explain by way of type. So as we look at that, I want to sort of do a little comparison here. So here there are some pretty good things happening with consistency. I've got headings that have a decorative or display font. I've got body text that is in a highly legible font. And I can still read that, even if it was scaled down to maybe the size of a cell phone. Over here, some common issues. You can see that really our headline isn't very big and bold. You do want to have some sort of larger, very clear sort of typography that makes, sort of emphasizes, I would say, the real topic at hand so that people don't have to kind of like really look for it. So yeah, use emphasis, go big, maybe switch colors. Also, notice that this has a zillion different fonts at different sizes, and so it doesn't really have continuity, which is one of the principles of design. We really don't want to have like a sort of kitchen sink approach. In general, I would say stick with 2 fonts, maybe 3 at most. You're going to have one for your headings. Now, headings could be sort of your major heading and your subheadings, what is sometimes called the H1 and the H2. And then thirdly, you would have what is called body text. So this stuff down here, which is, again, you want to use in a very limited amount, right? But occasionally you do need to have a little explanation. Okay, so having said that, how can I quickly and easily create the sort of continuity that I might want in Illustrator? So here is the big trick. You want to go to Window, Type, and go to Character Styles. If you already have this icon, you could just go right there, but usually it's not there by default. And what this panel will allow you to do is essentially brand all of your typography. And if you decide later that, oh, I want to change the color or the font, you can do that with one simple step globally rather than having to do any selections and mucking about. Okay, so why don't I show you rather than talk about it? All right, so here's what I made. If I know I'm going to use this for maybe my big, bold heading 1, all right? Because maybe I'm going to reuse that same text at the bottom to say which of these 2 players actually wins the greatest of all time challenge. Okay, so what I would do is I would select the one instance of that, click the plus button, and you can see it says character style. Now, if I double click on the actual text, all that does is allow me to rename that, and I could, I could do that now. I could type in H1, and that's great. But what has it actually done? Well, if you wander away from the text and click over here, yeah, you can see what it's done is actually packaged everything about that text. So I know exactly how big it is, and I might want to make that a whole number. And I know what font it is. I know if it's maybe italics or condensed or thin or whatever it might be. I also know what color scheme I use. So in this case, the white and this blue, which is the Steph dark blue we made in the color tutorial. Okay, so if I later decide I want to change this, if I have other instances of it, I can. So we'll do that in a sec. So I'll hit OK. So I've got my H1. My H2 actually has a bit of a challenge here because I have blue, red, and white that are all sort of subheadings, okay? So I would need to make one for each. But in this case, let's say I just want to try it out on the red so that I can see how this might affect things, globally. All right, so I'll select one of these. And again, I'll go to the plus. And here, again, I could rename it here, but if I double click off to the right, I could just change it here too. So I'll type in H2. And again, I might look and see, okay, it's the right font. I like the size. And this one is going to be red, and it's going to be the Jordan red color that we made last time. Okay, now if I decided I wanted to make sure that these are applying the exact same thing, because maybe they're a little bit off, right? So maybe I have a bunch of different text in there, and maybe, it's not quite the right colors. I can always just select those bits of text, and I could click H2, and bam! I now have perfect continuity of color, of size, of font, okay? And that's gonna save me a lot of time. Same thing's gonna happen with my body text. I would point out that when you're doing your heading and body text, you're gonna probably wanna use the two different types of type that you're gonna see in Illustrator. So I'll get to that in just a second, but what I'm gonna do here is just to round it out here, I will make my body text, and I'll just call this body. Okay, and it looks like, there we go. Now I've basically defined all of the typography for my infographic, and just to be really clear on how each of these blocks should be made, your heading text, you're gonna wanna just click, okay? And that's all you're gonna wanna do is change the size, and point type is great. So this is point type. I've got one point and it will type off to the right, okay? If I wanted to do my body text, right, because maybe there is gonna be multiple lines, just to be really clear, let me make this smaller. And if I click and drag, body text, as you're probably familiar, allows you to, change the paragraph width, and I get my dummy text, the lorem ipsum text, as just placeholder text for any content I might want to have in here. Now, a couple of rules with body text that we probably should cover. One is that you want to try to avoid what are called widowed words, and that is a singular word on its own line. There's a related sort of error, which is an orphan, which would be a word maybe on its a separate page or on the next page all by itself. But in an infographic, which is one document, you're not going to really see that. But we want to try to avoid this when possible. So, changing the spacing, maybe just a little bit, can solve that problem. I would also strongly recommend for an infographic where the text is going to be very small, right? That you double check that it's going to be legible at cell phone size and that you do not use hyphenation. It does break the flow, and especially if it's really small, it's going to make that really hard to read. On this 1200 by whatever size vertically you want document, notice that this is 36 point font, and that's probably about as small as you can get away with. Anything less than that, people are going to struggle on their cell phones. Okay. But yeah, we want to try to avoid those orphaned words and get rid of hyphenation. So how do I get rid of hyphenation? All right, so I'm going to cruise the character, and just kidding, it's paragraph, and uncheck hyphenate. And you can see, that all the hyphens are removed. That actually also solved the orphan issue I have down here. And so there are some good workflows and some things to understand about working with typography in infographics.